His GPS never failed, but David always chose different routes. When police investigated this suspicious behavior, they were shocked to discover that every wrong route was actually part of a perfect plan, and David wasn't a victim. He was a hero. Welcome to the Hidden Stories, where we explore the incredible tales of ordinary people living extraordinary lives hidden in plain sight. Before we dive into today's story, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from, and if you've ever discovered someone was completely different from who you thought they were. David Fletcher had been driving a taxi through Chicago streets for 15 years. At 42, he was quiet, modest, and unremarkable. He had never married, never spoke about family, and lived alone in a small downtown apartment. Every morning at 6 a.m., he would arrive at the yellow cab office, get into the same car, and work until late into the night. Complaints about David at Chicago Yellow Cab were beginning to pile up. Customers constantly said the same thing. Why? Doesn't this driver ever listen to GPS? Why does he always take the longest route? I want the shortest route for my money. David always responded to these complaints in the same calm tone. Traffic is heavy, sir. This route is safer. But customers weren't satisfied. Company manager Frank Morrison had called David into his office. David, customer complaints about. You have increased dramatically. You have GPS. Why aren't you using it? David had shrugged. I am using it, Frank, but you know these streets better than me. GPS isn't always right. Frank wasn't convinced. David, this is your final warning. One more complaint and you're fired. Even with this threat, David didn't change his behavior. When taking customers to their destinations, he still ignored the routes GPS suggested. Sometimes he chose side streets instead of main roads. Sometimes he preferred neighborhood routes over highways. Customers got angry, but David remained calm. Officer Lisa Park had stopped David during a routine traffic control. She was conducting speed checks on Michigan Avenue. David's taxi was traveling at normal speed with no problems. But when Park routinely checked his documents and glanced at the GPS device, she was surprised. What's this? Park had asked. The GPS showed the route history for the past month. The routes David used were very strange. When taking customers to O'Hare Airport, why was he going through South Side? When going downtown, why was he circling through North Chicago? None of it made sense. David had started sweating. Officer, is there a problem? Park became suspicious. These routes are very odd. Why do you constantly use long routes? David's answer wasn't satisfying. Traffic. You know, main roads are always congested. Park took screenshots of the GPS records and reported it to headquarters. The case landed on Detective Amanda Cross's desk. When Cross examined the file, she was even more surprised. The routes David had been using for the past 6 months went through the strangest parts of the city. When Cross looked at the map, she saw the pattern. David constantly passed through strategic points of the city while taking customers. Near police stations, around federal buildings, important intersections, high security areas. This couldn't be coincidence. Cross had deepened her investigation. When she did a background check on David Fletcher, she found very little information. He had moved to Chicago 15 years ago, obtained a taxi license, and was a law-abiding citizen with a clean record. But there was no information about his previous life. Cross decided to put David under covert surveillance. She watched him for a week. David's behavior was indeed very strange. When GPS showed the shortest route, he chose different paths, slowed down on certain streets, stopped at some points, and examined the surroundings. On the third night, Cross noticed something important. David had passed near Federal Plaza while taking a customer to the airport. The normal route was to go via Michigan Avenue, but David had circled downtown, checking out all the federal buildings. It was as if he was surveying the area. Cross was. Now worried. Was David a terrorist? Was he gathering information about federal buildings? That night, she began researching David's background in more detail. When she checked the FBI database, Cross was shocked. There were no records under the name David Fletcher. It was as if he had appeared out of nowhere 15 years ago. This could only be the profile of someone in the Witness Protection Program. The next day, Cross contacted the FBI. She met with Agent Robert Hayes. Do you have any information about David Fletcher? Hayes went silent on the phone. Why are you asking? Cross explained the situation. Hayes's response surprised Cross. Stop following him. Immediately. Why? Because he's our guy. Cross was trying to understand. So he's an undercover agent? Hayes took a deep breath. Something like that. But we can't discuss this here. Come to my office tomorrow. The next day, Cross went to the FBI Chicago office. Hayes told her David's real story. David Fletcher was a fake identity. His real name was David Kane, and he was a former CIA operative. David worked for the CIA for 12 years, Hayes said. Special operations, urban surveillance, counterterrorism. He was one of the best. But in 2008, an operation went bad. His identity was exposed, and his life was in danger. Hayes continued, we put David in the Witness Protection Program. New identity, new life. But there was a problem. David's training was so deeply ingrained that he couldn't adapt to normal life. Cross was surprised. What do you mean? David was applying his CIA training even while driving taxi. He was constantly scanning the environment and conducting threat analysis. He wasn't listening to GPS because those routes weren't tactically sound. Cross understood now. So every wrong route was actually a security protocol? Hayes nodded. Exactly. David was monitoring the city for security while taking customers. He believed he was reporting suspicious activities to us. Hayes showed Cross David's reports from the past 6 months. David's unusual route notifications had provided very valuable information to the FBI. He was reporting suspicious vehicles, suspicious gatherings, potential threats. Thanks to David's taxi routes, we prevented 2 terrorist plots, Hayes said. The reason he passed Federal Plaza was that he detected a security vulnerability. He had discovered a surveillance point we didn't know about. Cross couldn't hide her amazement. Customers are complaining. David could lose his job. Hayes smiled. Don't worry about that. David's real job is already this. Being a taxi driver is just a cover story. Hayes shared one more secret with Cross. David's customers aren't coincidental. The FBI sometimes directs specific people to David's taxi. While David takes them, he also does background checks and prepares security assessments. That day, Cross looked at David with different eyes. The man she thought was an ordinary taxi driver was actually one of the city's most experienced security experts. Every wrong route, every unnecessary stop was actually part of professional surveillance. A week later, Cross encountered David. David had recognized her, of course. Detective Cross, he said calmly. I assume you spoke with Agent Hayes. Cross nodded. David, you're incredible. You've fooled everyone for 15 years. David had smiled. Not fooling, protecting. I'm David Fletcher, taxi driver. David Kane died 15 years ago. Cross understood. But your skills haven't disappeared. They never do, David had said. Once CIA, always CIA. Cross was curious. Don't. Customer complaints bother you? David shrugged. They just want to get from point A to point B. I get them there safely. The route doesn't matter. The result matters. David continued. Sometimes my customers are very important people. Politicians, business leaders, foreign diplomats. While I'm taking them, I'm also protecting them. GPS doesn't know this, but I do. Cross asked one last question. Haven't you ever wanted a normal life? David had taken a deep breath. This is my normal life. I've been protecting this city for 15 years. My customers reach their destination safely, and I monitor threats. Win-win. From that day on, Cross began to see David differently. David wasn't just a taxi driver. He was also the city's silent guardian. Every day he ensured the safety of thousands of people, and no one knew it. 6 months later, David's story had become legend at the police department. Young officers began calling him Ghost Driver, because David was everywhere in the city, but no one knew his real job. David still drives taxi through Chicago streets today. Customers still complain, but not as much as before, because a rumor has spread throughout the city. If your taxi driver takes you through strange routes, don't worry, he's protecting you. David's GPS still suggests the shortest route, but David still chooses his own path, because those routes don't just keep customers safe, they keep the entire city secure. And this will remain secret, because the best protectors are the ones no one knows about. Frank Morrison no longer complains about David, because the FBI told him the truth. Your David Fletcher is one of Chicago's most valuable employees. Don't lose him. Morrison never asks why. Some things are better left unknown. And every night when David returns home, he looks in the mirror and smiles. Because he knows David Kane died, but his spirit lives on. In Chicago streets, at every turn, on every route, silently protecting the city. This story reminds us that heroes walk among us every day, often disguised as ordinary people doing ordinary jobs. The quiet taxi driver, the unassuming mechanic, the reserved librarian. Any of them could be carrying incredible stories and extraordinary skills. Have you ever met someone who turned out to be completely different from who you thought they were? Share your story in the comments below. If this story gave you chills or made you think twice about judging people by their appearances, smash that like button and subscribe to the Hidden Stories for more incredible tales of hidden heroes, secret identities, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Turn on notifications so you never miss our latest stories. And remember, never underestimate the person sitting next to you. They might just be the hero the world needs. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.